The morning started like any other Saturday. The sun was just beginning to peek over the horizon, painting the sky in soft shades of orange and pink. Most people in the small coastal town were still asleep in their beds, but not her. She had always been an early riser, someone who found peace in those quiet hours before the world woke up. She laced up her running shoes, grabbed her water bottle, and stepped out of her small apartment. The cool October air hit her face and she took a deep breath. There was something about the smell of the ocean that made everything feel right. She had lived in this town her entire life, all 28 years of it. Every street corner held a memory. Every beach had a story. As a marine biologist, she spent most of her days in a lab or on research boats, studying water samples and documenting sea life. It wasn't glamorous work, and it certainly didn't pay well, but she loved it. The ocean had always been her sanctuary, her escape from whatever troubles life threw her way. She started her jog along the coastal path, the same route she took every weekend. The path wound along the cliffs, offering stunning views of the endless blue water below. On her left, the rocky hillside rose up, covered in wild grass and small bushes. On her right, a steep drop led down to the beach and the crashing waves. There were a few other people out this early. An elderly man walking his golden retriever waved as she passed. Two fishermen were setting up their gear near the pier, their tackle boxes gleaming in the early morning light. She waved back, keeping her steady pace. Her mind wandered as she ran. She thought about the grant proposal she needed to finish by Monday, the one that might finally give her the funding to expand her coral reef research. She thought about her mother, who kept calling to ask when she'd finally settle down and stop playing with fish, as she called it. She thought about the leaky faucet in her bathroom that she really needed to fix. These ordinary thoughts filled her head as she rounded the bend near Lighthouse Point. This was her favorite part of the run. The old lighthouse stood tall and proud on the rocky outcrop, its white paint chipped and faded from decades of harsh weather. The town kept saying they'd restore it, but they'd been saying that for years. That's when everything changed. Something in the water caught her eye. At first, she thought it might be a dolphin or a seal. They sometimes came close to shore in the early morning. But then she saw it again, and her stomach dropped. It was a person. Someone was out there in the water, way past where anyone should be swimming. She stopped running immediately, her heart suddenly pounding for a different reason. The person's head appeared above the water, then disappeared. Arms flailed desperately. Even from this distance, she could tell they were in serious trouble. Her mind raced. This part of the beach was dangerous. Everyone who grew up here knew about the riptide that formed near Lighthouse Point. There were signs posted everywhere warning swimmers to stay away. But tourists didn't always listen to warnings. They saw a beautiful beach and thought they knew better. She looked around frantically. The fishermen were too far away, and they probably couldn't even see what was happening from their angle. The man with the dog had already disappeared down the path. Her phone was back at her apartment. There was no time to run for help. Every second counted. The person's head went under again and didn't come back up as quickly this time. She didn't think. She just acted. Her body moved on autopilot, years of lifeguard training from her teenage summers kicking in. She sprinted down the narrow path that led to the beach, her shoes slipping on the loose rocks. Her water bottle fell from her hand and tumbled down the cliff, but she didn't stop to watch where it landed. When she reached the sand, she kicked off her running shoes without breaking stride. The beach was empty, no one to help, no one to even know what was about to happen. The cold sand gave way beneath her feet as she ran toward the water's edge. The ocean looked angry this morning. The waves were bigger than usual, crashing against the shore with a force that sent spray 10 feet into the air. The water was dark, almost black in the early morning light. She knew how cold it would be. She knew how strong that current was. She had lived here long enough to respect the ocean's power, but someone was drowning. Someone was dying right in front of her. She didn't hesitate. She ran straight into the waves. The shock of the cold water hit her like a physical blow. It was so cold it hurt, stealing the breath from her lungs. But she pushed forward, diving under the first big wave. The salt water stung her eyes, but she kept them open. Searching for any sign of the person, she swam with strong, purposeful strokes, fighting against the current that immediately tried to drag her sideways. The water pushed and pulled at her, making every movement twice as hard as it should be. Her clothes became heavy, weighing her down, but she kept swimming. Where were they? She'd lost sight of the person. Panic started to creep in. What if she couldn't find them? What if she was too late? What if she got caught in the riptide too and they both drowned? Then she saw him. A man, middle-aged, his face barely above water. His eyes were wide with terror. His mouth opened and closed, gulping water and air in equal measure. His arms moved weakly, no longer able to keep him afloat. She pushed herself harder, ignoring the burning in her muscles and the icy numbness spreading through her body. Just a little farther. Just a few more strokes. A wave crashed over her head, pushing her under. The world became a confused mess of bubbles and pressure and cold. She kicked hard, breaking the surface, coughing out seawater. She could taste the salt, feel it burning in her nose and throat. The man was closer now. She could almost reach him. His head went under. She dove down, her hands searching blindly in the dark water. Her fingers touched fabric, then an arm. She grabbed hold and kicked upward with everything she had left. They broke the surface together. The man immediately grabbed at her, his panic making him dangerous. His hands clutched at her neck, her shoulders trying to climb on top of her to stay above water. She knew this would happen. Drowning people always fought you. They couldn't help it. Pure survival instinct took over all rational thought. Stop! She tried to yell, but a wave hit them both, filling her mouth with water. They went under again, tangled together, the current pulling them deeper. This was it, she thought. This was how they both died, but then her lifeguard training cut through her own panic. She remembered what to do. She twisted in the water, breaking his grip. She came up behind him, wrapping her arm across his chest in a secure hold that kept his head above water but prevented him from grabbing her. "I've got you," she shouted over the roar of the ocean. "Stop fighting me. I've got you." He was still struggling, but weaker now. She could feel his body starting to give up. That was almost worse. At least when they fought, they were conscious. Now came the hardest part. She had to get them both back to shore. Getting back to shore felt impossible. Every time she thought they were making progress, another wave would crash over them, pushing them back. The riptide was relentless, pulling them sideways along the coast instead of letting them move toward the beach. Her arms felt like they were on fire. Her legs were going numb from the cold. The man had stopped fighting now, which should have made things easier, but it didn't. His body was dead weight in her arms, and she had to work twice as hard to keep both their heads above water. She couldn't tell if he was still conscious. Every few seconds she'd feel him cough or sputter, and she'd know he was still alive. That was all that mattered. She remembered something her old lifeguard instructor had taught her years ago. Never fight a riptide. It's stronger than you, and it will win. Instead, swim parallel to the shore until you're out of the current, then make your way back to land. It seemed crazy to swim away from safety, but it was the only way. She adjusted her grip on the man and started swimming sideways, letting the current help her instead of fighting against it. Her muscles screamed with every stroke. Salt water had rubbed her eyes raw and everything looked blurry. Her throat burned from all the seawater she'd swallowed. Time lost all meaning out there. It could have been 5 minutes or 50. All she knew was the rhythm of her movements. Stroke, breathe, kick. Stroke, breathe, kick. Don't let go. Don't give up. Keep moving. Finally, she felt the pull of the current start to weaken. They'd made it out of the riptide. Now she could angle back toward the shore. She could see the beach more clearly now. It looked so far away still, but at least they were heading in the right direction. Her body was shutting down. She'd never been this exhausted in her entire life. Her vision was starting to blur at the edges. Her arms barely responded to her commands anymore. But she couldn't stop. Not when they were this close. A larger wave lifted them up, and for a moment she thought it might push them under for good. But instead it carried them forward, closer to shore. Then another wave and another. The ocean that had tried so hard to kill them was now helping push them. Toward safety. Her foot touched something solid. Sand. They were in shallow water now. She tried to stand, but her legs gave out immediately. She fell forward, still holding on to the man, both of them half in the water and half on the beach. She heard shouting. Footsteps running across the sand. The two fishermen she'd seen earlier were sprinting toward them. Strong hands grabbed her arms, helped her drag the man fully onto the beach. Someone wrapped a jacket around her shoulders. She was shaking so hard she could barely speak. "Call 911, one of the fishermen yelled to his friend. "Both of them need help." The man she'd pulled from the ocean lay on his side, coughing up seawater. His lips were blue. His eyes were closed. But he was breathing. He was alive. She collapsed onto the sand next to him, her chest heaving, trying to catch her breath. Every muscle in her body trembled. She'd never felt cold like this before. It went deeper than her skin, deeper than her bones. She felt frozen from the inside out. More people arrived. Someone had brought blankets from their car. The old man with the golden retriever appeared, his dog barking excitedly at all the commotion. A woman from one of the houses near the beach came running with towels and a thermos of hot coffee. The fisherman, who'd called for help, knelt beside her. "That was the bravest thing I've ever seen," he said, his voice shaking. "You saved his life. You know that, right? You saved his life." She couldn't respond. She just nodded, still trying to breathe normally. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking. She pulled the blanket tighter around herself, but it didn't help. The cold had settled deep inside her. Within minutes, she heard sirens in the distance. The ambulance was coming. She looked over at the man beside her. He'd stopped coughing now and was breathing more regularly, though his eyes were still closed. Who was he? Why had he been swimming in such a dangerous spot? Didn't he see the warning signs? The paramedics arrived quickly, their equipment bags bouncing as they ran across the sand. There were 4 of them, and they immediately split into 2 teams. 2 began working on the man, checking his vital signs, wrapping him in thermal blankets, starting in 4 line. The other 2 came to her. "Can you tell me your name?" A young female paramedic asked, shining a light in her eyes. She told them, though her voice came out as barely a whisper. Her throat was raw from the salt water. "You're hypothermic," the paramedic said. "We need to get you warmed up. Can you tell me what happened?" She explained as best she could, though the details were already getting fuzzy in her memory. She remembered seeing him in the water. She remembered running and swimming. Everything after that was a blur of waves and cold and fighting to stay alive. A police officer arrived and started asking the fishermen questions. She heard them describing what they'd witnessed, how she'd run into the ocean without hesitation, how long she'd been out there fighting the current. It sounded like they were talking about someone else, some hero from a movie. Not her. The paramedics working on the man suddenly got very quiet. She saw them looking at something, then looking at each other with wide eyes. One of them pulled out his phone and stepped away, speaking in hushed tones. "What's wrong?" she asked. "Is he okay?" The paramedic, checking her blood pressure, smiled. "He's stable. You got him out just in time. A few more minutes and it would have been too late." But something was happening. More people were gathering around. The police officer who'd been taking statements suddenly walked over to the man, stared at his face for a long moment, then pulled out his radio and called for backup. Why would they need backup? Someone was already calling the fire department to bring additional equipment. She tried to stand, but the paramedic gently pushed her back down. "You need to stay still. We're going to transport you both to the hospital for observation." But I'm fine," she protested, though even she didn't believe that. She felt like she'd been hit by a truck. "You jumped into a riptide and nearly drowned saving someone's life," the paramedic said firmly. "You're going to the hospital." No arguments. They loaded her onto a stretcher, which felt ridiculous. She'd walked here on her own 2 feet a few hours ago. But when she tried to sit up, the world spun, and she had to lie back down. As they wheeled her toward the ambulance, she caught one of the paramedics saying something to a police officer. She only heard part of it, but what she heard made no sense. "Are you sure it's really him?" Here, in our town? The police officer nodded. I saw his ID myself. It's him. I can't believe it. Of all the people she could have saved, who? She called out, but they were already lifting her stretcher into the ambulance. The doors closed, and the ambulance started moving. Through the small window, she could see them loading the man into the second ambulance. There were more people gathered around now, all talking excitedly, some taking pictures with their phones. What was going on? Who was this man? And why did everyone seem so shocked that she'd saved him? She was too exhausted to think about it anymore. As the ambulance drove toward the hospital, she closed her eyes. All she wanted was to get warm again and sleep for about a week. Whatever mystery was unfolding around the man she'd rescued, it would have to wait until her body remembered how to stop shivering. The hospital was warm. That was the first thing she noticed when they wheeled her through the emergency room doors. The warmth hit her like a wave, and she realized just how cold she'd been. Her body started shaking even harder as it tried to adjust to the temperature change. Nurses swarmed around her, taking her vital signs, wrapping her in heated blankets, asking her questions she barely had the energy to answer. They hooked her up to monitors that beeped steadily. Someone started in four in her arm. The whole thing felt surreal, like it was happening to someone else. Your core temperature is dangerously low, a doctor told her. We need to warm you up slowly. You're going to be here for a while. She nodded, too tired to argue. All she wanted was to close her eyes and sleep, but they kept waking her up every few minutes to check on her. They said something about making sure she didn't have any complications from the cold. Water exposure. Time passed in a strange blur. At some point, they moved her from the emergency room to a regular hospital room. The heated blankets kept coming, one after another. Slowly, painfully, feeling started returning to her fingers and toes. It hurt more than being numb had. She must have dozed off because when she opened her eyes again, the light outside the window had changed. It was mid-afternoon now. How long had she been here? She tried to sit up and immediately regretted it. Every muscle in her body screamed in protest. A nurse came in, smiling when she saw she was awake. How are you feeling? Like I got hit by a bus? She croaked. Her throat still hurt from all the salt water. The nurse laughed. That's actually a good sign. Means your body is recovering. Your temperature is almost back to normal. She checked the monitors and made some notes on a tablet. You had a lot of visitors asking about you, but we told them you needed rest. There are some police officers who want to speak with you when you're feeling up to it. Police? Why? Standard procedure for something like this? They just need to get your full statement. The nurse paused, then added, also there are reporters outside. Lots of them. Reporters? She was confused. Why would reporters care about a drowning rescue? The nurse gave her a strange look, like she was surprised by the question. You really don't know who you saved, do you? Before she could answer, there was a knock on the door. A police officer stepped in, the same one she'd seen on the beach. He looked tired but excited about something. Good to see you awake, he said, pulling up a chair beside her bed. I need to ask you a few questions about this morning, if that's okay. She nodded, and he pulled out a notebook. The questions were straightforward at first. What time did she see the man in the water? Why did she decide to go in? Did anyone else witness what happened? She answered as best as she could. Though some details were still fuzzy, then the officer leaned back in his chair and studied her face carefully. Do you follow international news much? The question caught her off guard. Sometimes. Why? Do you recognize the name Dr. Richard Chun? She thought about it. The name sounded vaguely familiar, but she couldn't place it. Maybe? I'm not sure. The officer pulled out his phone and showed her a picture. It was a professional photo of a distinguished-looking man in his 50s, standing at some kind of podium with flags behind him. He was the man from the beach? She recognized him immediately, even though in the photo his face wasn't blue and his hair wasn't plastered to his head with seawater. That's him, she said. That's the man I pulled out. Who is he? The officer took a deep breath. Dr. Richard Chun is one of the most important humanitarian workers in the world. He founded the Global Medical Relief Foundation about 20 years ago. His organization has provided healthcare to millions of people in war zones, disaster areas, and impoverished regions. He's been nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize 3 times. She stared at the photo, trying to process this information. The man she'd saved wasn't just some tourist who'd ignored the warning signs. He was someone who saved lives for a living. Someone important. Someone the world needed. He was supposed to give a major speech at an international summit in 2 days, the officer continued. World leaders were planning to attend. If he hadn't been at that summit, critical aid agreements for several countries would have fallen through. You didn't just save one man. You saved all the work he's going to do, all the people he's going to help. The weight of those words settled over her like a heavy blanket. She'd just been trying to save someone from drowning. She hadn't thought about who he was or what he did. She'd just seen another human being in trouble. Is he okay? She asked quietly. He's doing well. Better than expected, actually. The doctors say another few minutes in that water and he would have been gone. You got to him just in time. The officer closed his notebook. The media is calling you a hero. Your story is everywhere. National news, international news, social media. Everyone wants to talk to you. She felt her stomach drop. I don't want to talk to anyone. I just want to go home. I understand, but I'm not sure that's going to be possible right now. There must be 50 reporters in the hospital parking lot. They're waiting for you to be discharged. This couldn't be happening. She was just a regular person who'd done what anyone would have done in that situation. She didn't want to be on the news. She didn't want to be called a hero. She just wanted her quiet life back. Over the next few hours, she learned just how much had changed. The nurse brought in her phone, which had been in her apartment when all this happened. Her mother had called 17 times. There were hundreds of text messages from friends, old classmates, distant relatives she hadn't heard from in years. Her social media accounts were exploding with friend requests and messages from strangers. Someone had found out where she worked. And her boss had called to tell her that reporters had shown up at the marine biology lab. The university president wanted to give her an award. The mayor wanted to give her a key to the city. Everyone wanted something from her. She turned off her phone and stared at the ceiling. This morning she'd been nobody. A marine biologist studying coral reefs, living paycheck to paycheck, worrying about grant proposals and leaky faucets. Now she was headline news around the world. There was another knock on her door. She almost told whoever it was to go away, but something made her say, "Come in." A different nurse poked her head in. "You have a visitor who's very insistent about seeing you. He says it's important." "I really don't want to see any reporters." "It's not a reporter." The nurse smiled. "It's Dr. Chun, the man you saved. He's asking if you'd be willing to speak with him." Her heart started beating faster. She wasn't sure she was ready for this. What do you say to someone whose life you saved? How do you even start that conversation? But she couldn't say no. She needed to see for herself that he was really okay, that everything she'd gone through this morning had been worth it. "Okay," she said softly. "Send him in." The nurse disappeared, and a moment later the door opened again. The man from the beach walked in, and he looked completely different from the last time she'd seen him. He was clean now, wearing hospital scrubs, his hair neatly combed. But it was his eyes that struck her. They were filled with tears. He walked slowly to her bedside and just stood there for a moment, looking at her like he couldn't quite believe she was real. "I don't know how to thank you," he finally said, his voice breaking. "You gave me my life back." She didn't know what to say to that. So she just said the simplest truth she could think of. "You would have done the same for me." He shook his head slowly. "I'd like to think so, but I honestly don't know if I would have had your courage. What you did this morning was extraordinary." They talked for a long time after that. He told her about his work, about the foundation he'd built, about the speech he was supposed to give. He explained that he'd come to their little town for a brief vacation before the summit. Just a few days to clear his head and enjoy the ocean. He'd been a strong swimmer his whole life, but he'd underestimated that riptide. His arrogance had nearly cost him everything. I've survived war zones, he said with a sad smile. I've worked through epidemics and natural disasters, and I almost died on a peaceful beach because I didn't respect the ocean. She understood that completely. The ocean demanded respect. It didn't care who you were or what you'd accomplished. As he stood to leave, he paused at the door. This isn't over, he said. I'd like to stay in touch, if that's all right with you. I feel like fate brought us together for a reason. She nodded, not sure what he meant, but too tired to ask. After he left, she lay back against the pillows and closed her eyes. Tomorrow she'd have to face the reporters and the attention and the strange new reality of being called a hero, but tonight, she just wanted to rest and be grateful that they were both alive. They discharged her from the hospital the next morning. She'd hoped to slip out quietly through a back entrance, but the hospital staff told her it was impossible. The reporters had figured out every exit. There was no avoiding them. A hospital security guard escorted her to the main entrance. Through the glass doors, she could see them. Dozens of reporters with cameras and microphones, news vans with satellite dishes, photographers jostling for position. Her mouth went dry. This was really happening. Ready? The security guard asked. She nodded, even though she wasn't ready at all. She'd never be ready for this. The moment she stepped outside, the crowd surged forward. Microphones were shoved in her face. Camera flashes went off like fireworks. Everyone was shouting questions at once. How does it feel to be a hero? Were you scared you might die? Did you know who Dr. Chun was when you saved him? What was going through your mind in the water? The security guard tried to clear a path to the parking lot where her friend was waiting with her car, but it was slow going. She kept her head down, mumbling no comment to every question. Just like the hospital's media relations person had advised her to do, finally she made it to the car. Her friend Lisa had known her since high school. As soon as she climbed in and shut the door, Lisa locked it and pulled away quickly. "Oh my God," Lisa said, glancing in the rearview mirror at the reporters running after them. "This is insane. You're famous." "I don't want to be famous," she said, sinking down in her seat. "I just want my normal life back." But normal was already gone. When they pulled up to her apartment building, there were reporters there too. Someone had figured out where she lived. Her landlord was outside, looking annoyed, trying to keep them off the property. "You can stay at my place," Lisa offered immediately. "They don't know where I live." She gratefully accepted. She couldn't face going into her own apartment right now. Knowing reporters would be camped outside over the next few days, things only got crazier. The story had gone viral. Videos of the beach that morning, filmed by bystanders on their phones, were everywhere online. Someone had created a hashtag about her. There were think pieces about heroism and ordinary people doing extraordinary things. Talk shows wanted her to appear. Publishers wanted her to write a book. Her boss called to say the university was getting flooded with donation offers to her research program. People around the world wanted to support the work of the woman who'd saved Dr. Chun. Suddenly, the coral reef research that had been struggling for funding was getting more money than she'd ever dreamed of. "This is your chance," her boss said excitedly. "You could expand the whole program, hire a team, really make a difference." She should have been thrilled. This was everything she'd been working toward for years, but it felt wrong somehow, like she was profiting from something she'd done without thinking about any reward. On the third day after the rescue, she got a call from an unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. "Hello? Hi, it's Dr. Chun. I hope I'm not bothering you." She sat up straighter on Lisa's couch. "No, not at all. How are you feeling?" "Much better, thanks to you." He paused. "I've been watching the news coverage. I can't imagine how overwhelming this must be for you." "It's a lot," she admitted. "I've been thinking," he said slowly, "about what you said in the hospital, about how I would have done the same for you. I'm not sure that's true, but I'd like to believe it could be. And I've been wondering if maybe there's a reason we met that day." She waited for him to continue. "My foundation has done a lot of work around the world, but we've always focused on immediate medical needs. Emergency care, disease prevention, that kind of thing. But the truth is, we can't keep people healthy if we destroy the planet they live on. Climate change is already affecting health outcomes in poor communities. Rising sea levels, extreme weather, loss of food sources from dying oceans. He was talking about her work now, the research she dedicated her life to. I know you've gotten a lot of attention because of what happened, he continued. And I know you probably want it all to go away. But I have a proposal for you. What if we use this attention for something good? What if my foundation started an environmental division focused on ocean conservation? And what if you let it? She couldn't speak for a moment. What? You'd have complete control over the research agenda. Unlimited funding, access to resources and partnerships around the world. We could take your coral reef restoration work and scale it globally. Train communities in coastal regions to protect and restore their own reefs. Connect ocean health to human health in ways people can understand. It sounded too good to be true. Why would you do this? Because you saved my life, he said simply. And because the more I learn about your work, the more I realize how important it is. And because I think fate put us in that water together for a reason. She spent the next week thinking about his offer. She talked to Lisa, to her mother, to her boss. Everyone had opinions. Some people thought she should take the opportunity and run with it. Others worried she was being manipulated, that Dr. Chen felt obligated to her and was making promises he'd later regret. But when she really thought about it, the answer was clear. This was a chance to do everything she'd ever dreamed of. To make the kind of impact she'd only fantasized about during late nights in the lab. How could she say no? She called him back and accepted. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. Dr. Chen invited her to attend the international summit with him. She'd never been to anything like it. World leaders in suits, diplomats speaking multiple languages, discussions about policies that would affect millions of people. She felt completely out of place in her borrowed dress clothes, but when Dr. Chung gave his keynote speech, he started by telling the story of his rescue. He stood at the podium in front of hundreds of the most powerful people in the world and talked about that morning on the beach. We never know when one moment will change everything, he said, his voice echoing through the vast conference hall. This woman didn't hesitate when she saw someone in trouble. She didn't calculate the risk or wonder if it was worth it. She didn't wait for someone else to handle it. She saw a need and she acted. He gestured to where she sat in the audience, and suddenly hundreds of faces turned to look at her. She wanted to disappear. That's the kind of response our planet needs from all of us right now, Dr. Chun continued. Our oceans are in crisis. Our climate is changing. People are suffering. And we can't afford to hesitate or wait for someone else to fix it. We need to dive in, even when the waters are dangerous. The audience erupted in applause. She felt tears running down her face, though she wasn't entirely sure why. This moment felt too big, too important. A few weeks ago, she'd been worried about a leaky faucet. Now she was sitting in a room with people who shaped the world. After the speech, people wanted to meet her. Ambassadors and scientists and nonprofit leaders shook her hand and asked about her work. Dr. Chen introduced her as the director of his foundation's new environmental division. It still didn't feel real. That evening, there was a reception. She stood by a window overlooking the city, holding a glass of champagne she hadn't touched, watching the sunset. Dr. Chen joined her. Overwhelming? That's putting it mildly. He smiled. You'll get used to it. And you'll be amazing at this work. I can already tell. I'm just a researcher who got lucky, she said quietly. No, he said firmly. You're someone who risked everything to save a stranger. That takes a special kind of person. The world needs more people like you. She looked at him, this man whose life she'd saved, who was now giving her the opportunity of a lifetime. A month ago, they'd been strangers. Now their lives were intertwined in ways she never could have imagined. Thank you, she said, for believing in me, for all of this. Thank you for jumping into that water, he replied. I think we're going to do great things together. As she stood there watching the city lights come on one by one, she thought about that Saturday morning. How she'd been thinking about ordinary things like grant proposals and leaky faucets. How she'd had no idea her life was about to change completely. Sometimes the most important moments come without warning. Sometimes you don't get to prepare or plan. Sometimes you just have to trust your instincts and dive in, even when you're scared, even when the current is strong and the water is cold and you don't know if you'll make it back to shore. She'd taken that leap, and now she was going to see where it led. 6 months later, she stood on a different beach, halfway around the world. The water here was turquoise blue, so clear you could see the coral formations beneath the surface. A group of local fishermen stood beside her, waiting to hear what she had to say. She'd spent the last half-year traveling to coastal communities in 12 different countries. Each place had its own unique challenges, its own dying reefs, its own people who depended on the ocean for survival. And in each place, she'd worked with locals to develop restoration programs that actually worked for their specific needs. The foundation's resources had opened doors she never imagined possible. But more importantly, Dr. Chun had connected her with people who genuinely cared about making a difference. Scientists, community leaders, educators. They'd built something real together. "The coral here is sick," she explained to the fishermen through a translator. "But it's not dead. Not yet. With the right techniques, we can help it recover. And when the reef is healthy again, the fish come back. Your children's children will be able to fish these waters." One of the older fishermen nodded slowly. He'd been skeptical when she first arrived, another foreigner claiming to have answers. But she'd spent weeks here, diving with them, listening to their stories, learning about their traditional fishing methods. She'd earned their trust by treating them as partners, not problems to be solved. They started the restoration work that afternoon. It was hard physical labor, nothing glamorous about it. Her hands got cut on the coral. Her back ached from diving and surfacing repeatedly. But watching the fishermen carefully plant new coral fragments, seeing the hope in their eyes, made every moment worth it. That evening, she video called Dr. Chun from her small hotel room. He looked tired but happy. "How's the project going?" he asked. "Really well. The community is fully on board now. They're even talking about starting an ecotourism program to bring in additional income while the reefs recover." "That's fantastic." He paused. "You know, when I first proposed this division, I wasn't entirely sure it would work. But you've exceeded every expectation. The board is thrilled. Governments are reaching out wanting to partner with us. You've built something remarkable." She felt her cheeks warm. "I had a lot of help. And unlimited resources don't hurt. Resources are useless without the right person using them," he said. "You're changing lives here? Real, measurable change?" After they hung up, she sat on the small balcony of her room and watched the sunset over the ocean. The same ocean that had nearly killed them both. The same ocean that had somehow brought them together and changed everything. She thought about that Saturday morning often. How close it had all come to ending differently. If she'd been 30 seconds slower? If the current had been stronger? If she'd given up when her muscles were screaming? The entire world would have been different. Dr. Chun would have died on that beach. The summit would have happened without his voice. The aid agreements he'd negotiated would have fallen through. And she'd still be in her small lab, struggling to get grant money, dreaming about the kind of work she was doing now. It was strange how one decision could ripple out and touch so many lives. The fishermen here had no idea about the rescue. They just knew that someone cared enough to help them save their ocean. But she knew. She knew that every coral fragment they planted, every reef they restored, every community they empowered, it all traced back to that moment when she'd seen someone drowning and refused to look away. Her phone buzzed with a text from her mother. Just a picture of a news article with the headline, "Local Heroes Ocean Conservation Work Reaches 50 Countries." Her mother had sent 3 heart emojis and the words, "So proud of you, baby girl." She smiled. Her mother had finally stopped asking when she'd give up the fish research and get a real job. It had only taken becoming internationally famous for that conversation to end the media attention. had died down considerably, which was a relief. She still got recognized occasionally, especially in her hometown, but for the most part, people had moved on to the next viral story. She preferred it that way. The work mattered more than the recognition, though she had to admit the attention had helped. When people saw her on the news talking about dying coral reefs, they actually listened. Schools invited her to speak to students. Environmental organizations wanted to collaborate. Donors who'd never cared about ocean conservation before suddenly wanted to fund her projects. She'd learned to use her platform carefully. Every interview, every speech, every public appearance became an opportunity to talk about the ocean, to make people understand that saving the environment wasn't just about polar bears and rainforests. It was about the people who lived on coastlines, who depended on healthy oceans for food and income and survival. The next morning, she joined the fishermen for an early dive. The sun was just coming up, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Under the water, she could see the coral fragments they'd planted yesterday, already beginning to attach to the reef structure. It would take years before this reef was fully restored, but the process had begun. When she surfaced, one of the younger fishermen was smiling widely. "My son wants to be a marine biologist now," he said in broken English. "Because of you. He says he wants to save the ocean." She felt tears prick her eyes behind her diving mask. This was why it all mattered. She spent another month in that community before moving on to the next project. Each place taught her something new. Each group of people showed her different ways of relating to the ocean. She was learning just as much as she was teaching. Dr. Chun had been right about fate. She didn't believe in destiny exactly, but she believed that sometimes life gave you opportunities to step up and be more than you thought you could be. Sometimes you got a choice to either play it safe or dive into the unknown. A year after the rescue, Dr. Chun invited her to speak at another international summit. This time she was ready for it. She stood at the same podium where he'd told their story and talked about the work they'd accomplished together. "A year ago, I was nobody," she told the audience. "I was a researcher struggling to fund a small coral reef study. Then I met Dr. Chun in the worst possible circumstances, and everything changed. He gave me resources, yes. But more importantly, he gave me a platform to amplify work that matters." She clicked to the next slide, showing before and after photos of restored reefs. "This isn't about me being a hero. This is about what's possible when we decide to act. When we stop waiting for someone else to fix things and take responsibility ourselves. Every person in this room has the power to make a difference. The question is, will you take the leap?" The applause was thunderous. But the best moment came afterward, when a young woman approached her nervously. "I'm a graduate student studying marine biology," the woman said. "I've been thinking about giving up because I didn't think I could make a real impact. But hearing your story, I think I'm going to keep going." She hugged the young woman. "Please do. The ocean needs people like you. People who care enough to keep trying even when it's hard." That night, she and Dr. Chun had dinner together. They'd become genuine friends over the past year, their bond forged in salt water and second chances. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked. "Your life was so much simpler before." She thought about it. Really thought about it. She missed the quiet sometimes. Missed being anonymous. Missed not having the weight of expectations on her shoulders, but then she thought about the fishermen who could now feed their families. The reefs coming back to life. The children dreaming of becoming scientists. The ripples spreading out from that one morning on the beach. "No," she said honestly. "I don't regret it at all." He raised his glass. "To diving into cold water." She clinked her glass against his and smiled. "To taking the leap. Because that's what it had all been about, really. Taking the leap even when you're scared. Acting even when the outcome is uncertain. Choosing to be the person who helps instead of the person who walks away." She jumped into that riptide not knowing if she'd survive. And yes, she'd saved a life. But in a way, she'd saved her own life too. She'd found her purpose. She'd discovered she was capable of more than she'd ever imagined. Sometimes, the most important moment of your life comes without warning. Sometimes it looks like just another Saturday morning jog. Sometimes fate disguises itself as a stranger drowning in the ocean. And sometimes, if you're brave enough to dive in, that moment changes everything, not just for you, but for everyone whose life you touch afterward. Every choice ripples outward. Every action matters. Every moment is a chance to be the person the world needs you to be. She'd taken that chance, and she'd never stop being grateful that she had.